Welcome to Sparks of History, where Jewish history and world history meet. We are extremely honored and pleased to have with us today Rabbi Shvat. Rabbi Shvat studied at the Etzion in Kiryat Arba yeshivot, where he received rabbinic ordination smicha and served as a sergeant in the IDF Tzahal. Rabbi Shvat earned a BA in Tanach Bible from Michlelet Herzog, as well as an MA in Jewish History and Talmud from Landers College. Rabbi Shvat is an extremely popular international lecturer and educator and has addressed hundreds of communities both in Israel and abroad. Rabbi Shvat is director of Rav Kook's archives and has published over 200 articles, as well as several volumes on the previously unpublished writings of Rav Kook. And appropriately, today we'll be discussing the fascinating life and significant historical impact of Rabbi Abraham Isaac HaCohen Kook. Rabbi Shvat, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
To get started, and there's so much, how did Rav Kook's upbringing and education shape his world outlook?
Mm-hmm. It's always good to start at the beginning. Maybe I'll just first start out with a brief introduction. I know most of the Anglos who listen to this podcast have heard a lot more about Rav Soloveitchik than they had of Rav Kook. Rav Kook's writings, very, very little has been published in English. And I think, first of all, I have to say kol hakavod that you're bringing one of the first to bring Rav Kook to the English speaking audience, especially from a historic point of view. Rav Kook is really a game changer, and it really began from the beginning, where his mother was from a family of Chabad, and his father worked as a meshulach, collecting money for the Volozhin yeshiva, whereas his father's family were starch misnagdim, and his mother was Hasidic. And there's actually an interesting story. Beryl Katznelson, one of the leaders of the socialist Zionist movement, once was waiting in Rav Kook's waiting room, and he noticed that on the wall there was a picture of the Balatanya right next to a picture of the Vilna Gaon. And when his turn came to come into Rav Kook, he said to Rav Kook, it's interesting. You have the two of them on your wall together. During their lifetimes, they were arch enemies. To which Rav Kook answered, not only are they on my wall together, they are on my heart together. And Rav Moshe Tzvi Neria and also Professor Rosnak summarized Rav Kook's philosophy and the some 45 cookbooks with the heading of the Achdut HaHofachim, uniting the opposites. And really, the time has come in Jewish history that Rav Kook, in his harmonic way of seeing the world, with the thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis, that's what he does regarding the Rambam and the Kuzari, the Hasidim and the Misnagdim, Zionism and religion. And just like anybody, even if you've never heard or never learned music before, when you hear harmony, it sounds good. It sounds pleasant objectively. And even if you don't understand why. And that is that holistic point of view is where we're at now in Jewish history, where Rav Kook explains that all of history, just like by the micro, so to the macro, all of life is trial and error, but the general direction is constant evolution and improvement and maturing. And Rav Kook writes that mankind is ready for that harmony, to harmonize all of the different aspects. That he was unique also in that maybe together with the Ramban and the Maharal, one of the few in Jewish history who actually wrote chidushim, innovative books on every single aspect in Judaism. And whether it be halacha, whether it be Gemara, whether it be Kabbalah, Chassidut, poetry, Tanach, really everything. Most rabbis have their specialty or two or three specialties. And as Professor Shaul Lieberman, who is one of the younger Chevrut, that a lot of people don't know, that as a historian, one of the best ways of understanding a figure is by looking at their students. So if you look at Rav Kook's students, he used to learn with younger Chevrutot, with Rav Yitzchak Hutner, the Pachad Yitzchak, who, as a matter of fact, even was quoted as saying that half of what I am is because of Rav Kook. And Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, whenever he quoted the Rav with a capital T, he was referring to Rav Kook, who was Mesader Kedushin, who was the Sandik of his oldest son. And you put that together with Bible scholars like Professor Shaul Lieberman, a Talmudic scholar, and his other students, Rabbi Dr. Binyamin Menashe Levine, Rabbi Dr. Moshe Zaidel. And you mix that together with the Nazir, who was a totally different character. If you're looking for somebody interesting to make a program, you should definitely do one on the Nazir once. And together with Rav Karlak, who was a classic Yerushalmi, old-fashioned, old yeshuv, and all of them were in awe of Rav Kook. Even the Imre Emet, a lot of people don't know. There's a documented story. By the way, just about all the stories that I tell are documented. That's one of the things that I do in Rav Kook's archives. He was once on a boat ride with Rav Kook, and
This is who now? This is the Imre?
The Imre Emet.
Okay.
That's the Sfat Emet's son.
Okay.
And he met several times with Rav Kook. Yeah, for the Ger, right, Ger Rebbe. And he discussed Parshat HaShavua with Rav Kook, and his shamus, his aide, said that he had never seen the Ger Rebbe sit like a student before a Rebbe, just sitting and absorbing every word that Rav Kook was saying. And as they left, the Ger Rebbe turned to his shamus and said, if you would tell me that Rav Kook is the Mashiach, I would believe you. And also, by the way, it's interesting. I mentioned Professor Shaul Lieberman, who I actually interviewed 3 of his top students. And when you interview someone, you got to hide, what you're getting to. What's called the Mesiach Lefi Tumo. You want to get a real answer. So I wanted to know what Rav Shaul Lieberman had to say about Rav Kook, because again, he was learned with Rav Kook on a daily basis as a young man. And all 3 of them, that is Rabbi Professor Dov Zlotnick, Rabbi Professor Eliezer Alivni, and Rabbi Dr. Shammai Friedman, Yibadel Chaim Arukim. When I asked the question that I really wanted to get to, who did Professor Lieberman mechabed? Who did he honor? Who did he respect? All 3 of them, their first reaction was they laughed and they said he didn't respect anybody. And then they said, except for Rav Kook. And Professor Lieberman was known to have said that Rav Kook knew everything. And when that comes from a Professor Shaul Lieberman, and a compliment, regarding Rav Kook's Chassidut and the Zirat Shamayim, like Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer said about Rav Kook, that we have a lot of Gedolim, but we're all Gedolim up to the handle of Rav Kook's door. Or in his hesped, in his eulogy, Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer said, I wish I could daven Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur like Rav Kook davens his daily mincha with such kavanah. And anybody who knew Rav Kook was blown away. And that's just getting back. It's a shame that growing up in America, we never really learned Rav Kook. There are a lot of reasons for that, but Mainly because most of those who teach and know the writings of Rav Kook made Aliyah, so they're not around to teach it that often. But so again, kol hakavod that you're doing a program on Rav Kook.
So what was it in the upbringing, aside from, the dialectic of his parents? I would assume that the education he received was a standard Eastern European yeshiva education. It's not like he went to university to learn philosophy. How did it happen? It was just like one of these like miracles of Jewish history that a figure like this arose. It was on his own, he came to all of these incredible ideas.
So it's Rav Kook really was the right man in the right time in the right place. There was a lot going on in the Volozhin yeshiva when Rav Kook was 20 years old. And there was also Zionism in the Chovevei Etzion. The Rosh Yeshiva, the Netziv, was a Zionist. There was also the beginning of Reb Chaim Soloveitchik and the Brisker method. By the way, a lot of people don't know. Almost everything that I say here, you could Google and find online. It's documented that a lot of people don't know that Reb Chaim Soloveitchik used to prepare his Gemara Shiurim with the three top students of Volozhin at the time, which were Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer, Rav Kook, and I believe the third was Rav Baruch Ber Leibovich, if I remember correctly. And so again, it's just a shame that the Haredi world, especially in America, is not familiar with Rav Kook. But so there was a lot going on in the Volozhin yeshiva. People had just begun learning Tanach, right? The Haskalah movement. People were dabbling in writing Hebrew. So Hebrew as a spoken language and poetry, that was going on. The Netziv himself dealt with Tanach and Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, the Ktav Kabbalah. People, because of the Haskalah movement and the Reform movement, a lot of Rabbanim were beginning to broaden. And that really is one of the points that that Rav Kook, in trying to speak to the secular Zionists who were rebelling against, in their eyes, they were rebelling against traditional Judaism. Rav Kook said to them really 2 points. He said, number one, your rebellion is not against Judaism, it's against Galut. And that's a rebellion whose time has come. The rebellion that the young people wanted to make Aliyah. And their parents and many of the rabbis in Europe said no. Rav Kook said, hey, look at the Tanakh. We're supposed to live in the land of Israel. They said, well, we want to have a Jewish state, Judenstaat, by Hesder Herzog. And the parents said, no, we have to wait for Mashiach. And Rav Kook said, what do you mean? Look at the Tanakh, original Judaism. We always had a Jewish state. Judaism was not just a religion, but our nationality. And the young people said, Jabotinsky, let's set up an army. And the father said, no, that's not the Jewish way. And Rav Kook said, hey, look at the Tanakh. Jews were always great warriors. As a matter of fact, all the heroes of the Tanakh were military heroes. And same thing when Eliezer ben Yehuda said we should revive Hebrew as a spoken language. And many of the fathers said, no, it's Lashon HaKodesh. And Rav Kook said, well, you know what? Look at the heroes of the Tanakh. And all the heroes of Moshe Rabbeinu did not speak Yiddish. Otherwise, we would call him Moshe Rabinovich, right? They all spoke Hebrew. And basically, Zionism is a rebellion against Galut. And Rav Kook writes that young people are the ones who always make the revolutions. And this is a revolution whose time has come. And he's telling the young Chalutzim, the pioneers, he's saying, on these issues, you are more religious than your parents are. And this is the time that we have to return to original Judaism. And that is how Rav Kook believed that we should bring the young people back, the non-religious who had rebelled in his time, to bring them back to the original Judaism. Because Galut Judaism was stagnant, it was old-fashioned, and Rav Kook believed that the original Judaism is very, very appealing. And the second point that is really the same point that Rav Kook said, as we mentioned, we have to rediscover the broad Torah. Whereas obviously in Rav Kook's yeshiva, Merkaz Harav, they spent most of the day learning Gemara. But Rav Kook said we also have to learn Tanach, and we also have to learn Chassidut and Kabbalah and poetry and the Hebrew language and Yediat Haaretz and Musar and the broad Torah. That is what's going to attract people back to Torah, which is really the original Torah. In short, the original Torah is religious Zionist, and it's abroad. And if you look at Baal Tshuva yeshivas, when somebody sticks their head in and wants to check out Judaism, they don't. The yeshiva knows that you can't makarev, bring someone close to Torah through teaching them how to brush their teeth on Shabbat. But you teach them about the morality of Judaism, of Torah, the depth of the philosophy of the Torah, the beauty of Chassidut, Tanach, and that is what's going to get them, to bring them back. We have nothing to be embarrassed about. The Torah is godly. The only problem is that there had to be this rebellion. That's how Rav Kook explains the last Mishnah in Masechet Sotah, which says there's going to be a rebellion against Torah and rabbis, against tradition, as part of the Geula process. Rav Kook explains again in the up and down arrow, this is one of the downs, that there had to be a rebellion in order to rise to a higher point, forcing the rabbis and the yeshivas to rediscover the original Torah, which is the appealing Torah, that of religious Zionism and the broad Torah.
So today, when we look at, let's say, Kiruv, outreach, Jewish outreach, so today there's different nuances as to how to go to college campuses and how to approach people, but you're really dealing with people who lack knowledge and upbringing. In those times, we're dealing with people who, as you mentioned, rebelled. And so the other leading Torah authorities, in contradistinction to Rav Kook, their view was what? Because this is a rebellion, it needs to be squashed, and that's that? Or was it deeper than that?
Okay, so that's you worded your question very, very well. In general, religious people, not just rabbis, but in all religions, religious people have a tendency to be conservative with a small c. That they're very wary of reform. They hear the word reform or change and they run the other direction. And Rav Kook, who believes very strongly that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wears three hats. He created the world, he gave the Torah, but he also runs history. So we would be wise if we examine history and work lif'ol im el, as Chazal say, to work together with God. And if God revealed our eyes to have airplanes, we should use those airplanes for kibbutz galiot and gather the exiles. If He revealed our eyes to help childless couples conceive, well, we should use that modern science to fulfill the messianic nivuah prophecy that part of the Geula is that the childless will conceive. And the same thing with computers, and the same thing with the Zionist movement, the same thing with nationalism. Nationalism was a non-Jewish movement that was going on at the end of the 19th century in the time of Rav Kook. So Rav Kook is saying, hey, if Hashem runs the world, apparently he wants us to get into nationalism as well. He said the same thing about evolution. The arrow that I mentioned twice already, that is the arrow of evolution, where Rav Kook said, well, we don't know if Darwin is 30% right or 70% right, but if modern science thinks that evolution, that the world is based on evolution, well, that is what Hashem in our generation wants us to think. And that has a lot of ramifications. For example, Orot HaTshuva, Rav Kook's classic work on Tshuva, where he doesn't talk about repentance, he talks about improvement and how the most natural thing in the world is evolution. And just like the amoeba improved and monkeys improved and sports records and cell phones are constantly improving, the most natural thing in the world is for me and for all of us to improve. And that's how Rav Kook explains the Geula. And it's a shame, really, that so many of Rav Kook's amitim, how do you say, you mentioned the word before, is the rabbis in his generation, they shied away from new ideas rather than believing that Hashem wants these new ideas, wants us to use these for the best. I know Rav Yitzchak Hutner said about Rav Kook that I heard this from my Rebbe, Rav Waldman, who had learned with Rav Hutner, and he said that Rav Hutner said, I knew the Gedolim in Europe and in Yerushalayim who disagreed with Rav Kook, and I could tell you that Rav Kook was 20 times as great as every single one of them. And that's Rav Hutner speaking. So anybody who has a problem with Rav Kook, it's really just that they have never learned it. Because anybody who learns his ideas, they just blow you away.
So, but I would assume that Rav Kook's attitude, let's say, towards Reform Berlin Jews who looked at Berlin as Jerusalem, while he obviously loved them as Jews, was very different than his attitude towards the young Chalutzim in Israel. Is that correct?
Rav Kook believed in or, in seeing the lighter side of everything. As a matter of fact, almost all of his farim are called Orot, the light of Tshuva, the light of Israel, the light of Eretz Israel, the light of war. And Rav Kook even sees some positive aspects in Spinoza. He sees some positive aspects in Christianity. Obviously, by the way, I had the fortune of publishing Rav Kook's reaction, his letters, to Rav Duber Milstein, who had two boys who left the derech. And there's a series of very interesting letters of how to keep the channels open, keep connection with your children, don't throw them out of the house, continue supporting them. And the most interesting thing that I found historically is that the sons of Reb Duber Milstein, they were not Zionists. They were Bundists. They were both very actively and very successfully leading members of the Polish nationalist movement. And Rav Kook said to the father, he said, see the good in their ideals. Even though they weren't Chalutzim, they weren't Zionist, they were disconnecting themselves from the Jewish people. But Rav Kook said that the idea of brotherhood, of equality, these are great ideas. And by the way, one of the major successes of Rav Kook, whereas if in his time in the Haredi community, if one of the children left the derech and he was thrown out of the house, or sometimes they would do kriya or sit shiva on him today. If you read recent stories about Rav Gershon Edelstein and other Gedolim of the last 10 years, today their approach is that exactly that. They even take Rav Kook to an extreme. I recently heard a story, I couldn't believe it, but about Rav Gershon Edelstein, that a Jew from America, who apparently was in contact with, asked Rav Edelstein, my son, he's not religious anymore. He wants me to take him to Yankee Stadium. So Rav Edelstein says, okay, take him to the Yankee Stadium. But he says, but then he wants me to buy him a non-kosher hot dog. Rav Edelstein said, buy him a non-kosher hot dog. And it's based on Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach as a famous tshuva that says that the problem of buying a child a non-kosher hot dog is lifnei ver lo titen michshol. You're not allowed to help somebody sin. But if the situation is that he will, if by not buying him a non-kosher hot dog, you are causing him to hate Judaism, then it's the same story. It's the same Lifnei Iver. Again, I don't know if Rav Kook would go so far as Rav Edelstein, but it's interesting how much Rav Kook's Avat Yisrael. I think the most famous quote that even Haredim quote, they don't know they're quoting Rav Kook when they talk about that we need Ahavat Chinam instead of Sinat Chinam. Just as the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of needless hate, we need needless love, and that we see in the students of Rav Kook, the religious Zionists who were fighting shoulder to shoulder with the non-religious soldiers, whether it be in Gaza, whether it be in Lebanon. We hope the Haredim will also join in. But this is part of the unity and the harmony that that Rav Kook always talks about. It's interesting. Someone once asked his son, Rav Tzvi Kook, how do you know that Rav Kook is correct? Right? Breslov think that they're right. Lubavitch thinks that they're right. Satmar thinks that they're right. So you think that Rav Kook is right? How do you know that Rav Kook is right? And Rav Tzvi answered, simply because Rav Kook says that everyone is right. We should learn Avodat Hashem b'simchas, that happiness from Breslov. We should learn love fellow Jew from Lubavitch. We should learn tzniut from Satmar. We should love of the land of Israel from the Zionists, love of human beings from the socialists, etc., and to harmonize it together. So as long as somebody is talking positive ideology, it works together. The problem is when people start talking against other groups, that lack of tolerance, that's when the problems start, right? If somebody wants to say it's important to learn Torah, that's great. But as soon as he says, so don't go to the Israeli army, that's already a negative ideology, or vice versa. If somebody says, you should really serve Am Yisrael in the IDF, that's fantastic. Milchemet mitzvah. On the other hand, if he says, so don't go to yeshiva, that's already a negative ideology. And again, this is part of the orot, the positive, lighter side of everything.
How did Rav Kook view and respond to the Balfour Declaration? And did Rav Kook anticipate that there would be an independent Jewish state within a short period of time in Jewish history?
So Rav Kook knew about Herzl and the World Zionist Congress. As a matter of fact, a lot of people, even if they don't know anything about Rav Kook, they may know that he opposed women having the right of vote. But they don't know that already in the first Zionist Congresses, Rav Kook said that theoretically it would be better for women not to vote because it causes strife within the family. Shalom Bayit is more important. But he wrote that if the Zionist Congress wants there and it's important to have women vote, we shouldn't fight about it. And the same thing, he saw, again, where the arrow was going. He saw the first Aliyah. He saw the second Aliyah. By the way, it's interesting, Rav Tzvi Kook, his son, had the educational custom of not teaching Rav Kook's writings before he made Aliyah in 1904, not just because it was written in Galut. Rav Tzvi said that when Rav Kook met firsthand the idealistic chalutzim of the second Aliyah, those socialists who left everything that they had to fight malaria, to fight Arab marauders, and the whole concept of not living for money, but giving your money to the kibbutz. And he saw that very, very positively. So he saw where the world and where the Jewish people were going. And when World War I broke out and the Allies were fighting against the Turks and conquered the land of Israel, Rav Kook saw that this was an opportunity, and he actually was actively involved in the Balfour Declaration. As a historian, maybe you might want to do a program on who Lord Balfour was. I wrote an article in Makor Rishon about that because, again, the way the God of history runs things, Balfour was the right person with the right idea in the right time, in the right place. And so Rav Kook utilized this. And from the Balfour Declaration on, Rav Kook shifted into an even higher gear of Zionism, of cooperating with the secular Zionists. And thank God that he did, because that encouraged many religious people to make Aliyah, and that's what saved their lives. Not only did it advance the Zionist movement with the large Aliyah before the Shoah, the large Aliyah after the Holocaust, but it's interesting. Rav Kook says that one of the problems with religious Jews is that, or he actually words it with the secular Zionists. He says it's good that that Zionism began as a secular movement, because the religious Jews, if they would have asked the rabbis would still be debating until today. And the secular Zionists, they just rolled up their sleeves and got to work. And retroactively, it was a good thing. And after Hitler Yimach Shmo came to power and Agudat Yisrael left their Neturei Karta ideology and began participating in the Zionist movement, they understood eventually what Rav Kook understood beforehand. So, he actively participated in the Balfour Declaration. As a matter of fact, the British were sort of confused because they didn't understand how Jews are so argumentative. And they said, on the one hand, Balfour and a lot of the Jews, they're so happy. On the other hand, you have anti-Zionist Haredim who are anti. And then you had secular Jews like Lord Montagu, who said, no, we don't want nationalism. We are good English or German citizens, and we are not interested in going back to the land of Israel. And Rav Kook, again, was the right. He was in England. The God of history put him in England during World War I, so that he convinced the English that the vast majority of Jews definitely wanted the Balfour Declaration and were interested in coming back to the Holy Land. And this Lord Montagu, he's assimilated, but he doesn't know Judaism. That's why he wants to. That's why he's against Zionism. And the Haredim, statistically, they were a very, very small element of the anti-Zionist. Many rabbis, they didn't know what to make of Zionism. But again, Rav Kook always says, look at history, look at the God of history, see where the arrow is going, and Hashem wants us to cooperate.
What was Rav Kook's goal and vision in regarding the chief rabbinate? Today it's, the rabbanut, it's all about, is that rabbanut kosher? Is that, can you rely on this rabbanut, that rabbanut, whatever. What was his goal and vision regarding that? And what was the vision in establishing the yeshiva merkaz, which we call now Merkaz Harav?
So both of those, you could say, game-changing decisions and game-changing organizations were among the most successful and important ideas of Rav Kook. The chief rabbinate, actually, a lot of people don't know, it was instigated by the British. The British didn't understand who they're supposed to work with, because they had these Hasidim and those Hasidim, and these Haredim and those Haredim, and these Zionists and they're anti-Zionist, and you got two Jews and you have three opinions. And as soon as they started trying to make a Jewish homeland for the Jews with the Balfour Declaration, they couldn't understand how they could work. Like, who do we speak with? So they decided that what has to be done is there has to be a chief rabbinate. Inevitably, Rav Kook, as a leading religious Zionist, was the first person that they turned to, and that the Zionist movement turned to. And a lot of people don't know that Rav Yaakov Moshe Charlap, who was blown away when he met Rav Kook in the early 20th century, he was the one who convinced. Rav Charlap was the rising star in Yerushalayim. Everybody knew that this young 20-year-old was going to be the greatest rabbi of Yerushalayim. And when he became a Talmid Muvhak of Rav Kook, and he just followed Rav Kook regarding everything, and he convinced all of Yerushalayim, even though that Rav Kook has these innovative ideas. And again, religious Jews generally are scared of new ideas. Rav Charlap and Rav Kook explained that these are not new ideas. We're just going back to the original Judaism, which is religious Zionism. So the idea of the chief rabbinate, Rav Kook saw it as one of the stepping stones to the Sanhedrin. Rav Kook was a great thinker, and he knew the Gemara Masechet Megillah, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Bet, that says that from the ninth bracha on in Shmona Esrei, the Anshe Knesset Agdullah set up the Amida according to the order of redemption, where Barech Aleinu is that the land of Israel is supposed to flourish. The next stage is Tikah B'Shofar, Kibbutz Galiot, Me'as Aliyah, from all over. The next bracha is Hashiva Shoftenu Kivarishona, to revive the Sanhedrin. And unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, we don't have time to go into it. Maybe if you want to do a program once about Chidusha Sanhedrin and how it's going to be, and how Rav Kook, and also his opinion about where will there be animal sacrifices in the third Beit HaMikdash. He has a lot of interesting, innovative ideas to say about all of these things. But the Sanhedrin is when we have kibbutz galiot, and Jews are coming on Aliyah from Yemen and Morocco and Eastern Europe and Western Europe and America. And there are, just like Rav Yosef Karo saw in 1492, after the Girush Sfarad, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, and Jews were coming to Turkey and Ashkenaz and the land of Israel, he said, we need a Shulchan Aruch to organize Judaism, because everyone is moving from one country to the other. And Rav Kook saw, well, kibbutz galiot is the same thing, just squared and cubed. So he saw the need for Sanhedrin. We know today that there's a need for the Sanhedrin to make extensive innovations and updatings in halacha. And the same thing is true regarding the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva. When Rav Kook saw that there was a need for a new type of yeshiva, he saw that the young chalutzim, and a lot of young people over the last century, they look at the old-fashioned Judaism as something archaic from the Middle Ages, and it's outdated. And they are looking for something modern. And that's why Rav Kook writes a lot about the importance of having a modern yeshiva, which learns in Hebrew and learns Tanach and learns Chassidut and gives a broad education and is connected with the modern world, and et cetera, et cetera. Rav Kook, again, harmonizes everything. And again, if there are any listeners who have never learned the writings of Rav Kook, you should definitely it's worth giving it a chance, because anybody that I know that has tried learning the writings of Rav Kook has been blown away. I myself have classes in English you can find on YU Torah or in Yeshivat Beit El. But again, there isn't that much in English, but it's definitely worth giving it a try.
And as the
excuse me, I just wanted to add,
right,
in terms of a modern ramification, a lot has changed since the October 7th last year Simchat Torah, and one of the major changes in Israeli society is the place of religious Zionism, whereas if the chalutzim, the kibbutzniks, used to be the arrowhead of the Zionist movement, today you look at the army, and it's very clear that religious Zionists are the ones who are leading the charge. Unfortunately, I think most of the boys who have fallen are members of religious Zionism. Most of the mefakdei, plugot, chativot, today in the battle units, most of the lower officers are religious Zionism. And these are the lions who, despite the generation of TikTok and kids who are on their cell phone, it turns out that, even in the modern world, Jews know and can fight for their land and fight together with a unity. And these are the soldiers who really bridge the gap between the religious and the Zionist. And we hope it should be that way in politics as well. But a lot has changed in today in Israel, where a lot of the Zionists are less anti-religious. You see, my son told me that a lot of non-religious soldiers, when they go out to war, they ask the rabbanut, the chaplaincy, for tzitzit. They even have girls wearing asking for tzitzit. I don't know if you heard about that. But the bridges are being built. And again, we hope the Haredim join in because that's where the arrow is going. And it would really be chaval for them to be left out.
People use different terms and words and have different meanings for different concepts. So we have this concept of Atchalta de Geula, the beginning of redemption. We have the pains of the beginning of redemption. And then we have Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, the prayer for the state of Israel, where it references this is the beginning of the growth of the nurturing of redemption. How did Rav Kook talk about this, write about this, and again, what was his influence today on that whole discussion?
That's really a very important topic. Rav Kook was one of the first of the greatest rabbis, the Gedolei Ador in his generation, to talk in terms of, hey, we are in the Geula process. Rav Kook did not use the word Mashiach a lot. Lubavitch do, Lahavdil, Christians do. But if you look in the sources, Chazal usually talk about Yemot HaMashiach, the era, and the days of Geula. And it's a process. And Rav Kook saw the return of the land of Israel, the first Aliyah, the second Aliyah, the third Aliyah, the Balfour Declaration, Hitler's rise to power. He saw this as definitely part of the process. Now, some people ask, why is that important? There's no nafkamina because there was always a mitzvah to make Aliyah, regardless of whether we are in the Messianic era. There's a mitzvah to have a Sanhedrin, regardless of the Messianic era. There's always a mitzvah. A lot of people don't know to build a Beit HaMikdash, regardless of the Messianic era. So all these are things that we should be doing anyway. And they just were not doable 1,000 years ago, or 500 years ago, or 200 years ago. But now all of a sudden that we can do it, I guess that's a sign from the God of history that, yeah, we should be making Aliyah and we should be helping the land of Israel flourish and working on the Sanhedrin, et cetera, et cetera. From my experience, it's really an educational question. The fact that we are in the Geula process, that's a fact. There is a debate among statisticians whether most of the Jews of Israel already live in the land of Israel, or will it take place in the year 2032 in another 7 years. But everyone agrees that within 7 years, most of the Jews of the world will be living in the land of Israel for the first time since the exile of the 10 tribes almost 3,000 years ago. Now, this is historic no matter how you look at it. But from my experience, when people understand that it is not just a mitzvah to make Aliyah and a mitzvah to work the land of Israel, but when you put it in, hey, do you want to be part of Jewish history, of the final chapter of Jewish history, or do you want to be left out? People shift gears and they realize that, hey, I really should. This is a historic opportunity. And it's very clear this is where the future of the Jewish people is. And this is where the Torah Center is. And this is where Am Yisrael needs me, whether in the military or in the Torah world or in the high-tech world. And, why work in high-tech or in medicine or anything in New York when you can be adding to the Jewish state and the Jewish people, especially if it is part of the Geula process. I think I've seen that people think in terms of practical issues because of that Atchalta de Geula, which Rav Kook stressed. Because, it was a mitzvah 100 years ago. Rav Moshe Weinstein didn't make Aliyah. Lubavitcher Rebbe didn't make Aliyah. When people are looking for excuses, they always look and find. But one of the answers would be, well, today, Rav Tzvi would say, we're not knee-high into the Geula process. We are maybe waist-high, maybe neck-high into the Geula process. And I see with young people especially, um, that's a game changer in terms of their mindset. But it really shouldn't make a difference because all these things are things that we should be doing anyway, serving in the army and working the land and making aliyah. These are all mitzvot and commandments that we should be doing regardless of whether this is a Chalta de Geula or not. But yeah, Rav Kook was one of the first to call it by its name. Yeah, this is Chalta de Geula, and we see that it gets people excited.
Is it possible to learn um, the works, the Torah of Rav Kook, take ideas from that writing, apply it to our everyday life, but yet keep away from the politics that was always brought up when you discuss Rav Kook and the writings, and is that possible? And is there any second part of the question, is there any validity to a claim that we really don't know how Rav Kook would view the modern state of Israel today? He was pre-state, and there are a lot of tremendous ideas, and there's the or, and there's the light, and the positivity, but that is very difficult to take writings and apply it to today.
Okay, so regarding your first question, the more a person takes from Rav Kook, the better. On the other hand, it's just like Shabbat. It's better for a person to do or not to do half the melachot, or at least do the mitzvot aseh, even if he's not going to do the mitzvot, just like tefillin. If a person just has a tefillin to put on his arm, even if he's not going to put it on his head, or vice versa, at least you should do what you can. It's better for a non-religious Jew to give tzedakah than even if he's not observing kashrut or Shabbat. So whatever a person takes from Rav Kook is that much better, just like anything. On the other hand, if somebody really wants to understand, I think one of the central points that I've mentioned, even in this short program, is that Torah is a package deal. Torah Hashem Tmima Mishivat Nefesh. And Rav Tzvi Kook used to say that when is the Torah satisfying Mishivat Nefesh? When it's Tmima, when it is religious and Zionist, and also Avodat Hashem B'Simcha, and take the good from Lubavitch, and take the good from the Misnagdim, and take the good from the socialists, etc., etc. When the Torah is a package deal, that's when it really is beautiful. So if a person says, listen, I love Rav Kook, he has 2 books on Musar, and I love his writings on philosophy, and I love his writings on Kabbalah, and I love his writings on tshuva, right? I know there are some people in Chutz La'aretz who love his writings about Orota tshuva, but they're not Zionist, or they feel threatened by the idea of moving to the land of Israel, or they see it as something political. That's chaval, because it really is a package deal. Rav Kook's view of tshuva as constant improvement goes together with his view of the geula as a constant stage. It goes together with the evolution of the world. It goes together. It's really everything. So technically, it's better to accept half of Rav Kook than none. But if you're just accepting half, that's a sign that you really haven't understood the holistic aspect of Rav Kook. Also regarding, I know that there is a school of thought in the academic world that has a more leftist leaning. By the way, it's very interesting that Rav Kook is unanimously accepted. So even left-wing non-religious or left-wing religious Jews, they claim that Rav Kook is in their camp. And that's an interesting status that Rav Kook has. I wrote a lengthy article, again, you can find it in Hebrew, on that Rav Tzvi did not change Rav Kook's ideology or writings at all. He pashut applied them in the modern world. Rav Kook did not see the state of Israel. He didn't see the army of Israel. He didn't see the Six-Day War. He didn't see the Yom Kippur War. He didn't see October 7th. Neither did Rav Tzvi Yehuda. But what do you do in a situation like this? Well, if you want to understand Rabbeinu Tam, look at his students. You want to understand the Rambam, his son is the best authority. So too, when you want to understand Rav Kook, the best thing that we have available is his students, which is Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who was alive until the 1980s, the Nazir, the Rav Charlap, and really all of Rav Kook's students all agreed not just on religious Zionism, not just on that we are in the Geulah process, but also had more of a hawkish way of looking at the Israeli army. By the way, they were left wing when it comes to the social and economic politics. That's why a lot of people, young people, they get confused. Wasn't Rav Kook right wing? Yeah, on nationalist issues, he said that we need to stand up for the honor of the Jewish people. And Melech Shemachal al Kvodo Ein Kvodo Machu, the only one in the nation of Israel who cannot forego his honor is the king of Israel, because it's not his honor, it's the honor of the chosen people. And Habocher Ba'amo Yisrael Ba'ava, Hashem chose the Jewish people out of love. And the way to apply that is when Am Yisrael goes to war, yeah, we go to war. When Am Yisrael was in the underground, we were in the underground. When Am Yisrael is settling the land of Israel, yeah, we settle the land of Israel. And so it really is, again, I like the idea that there are some doves who like to claim that Rav Kook was in their camp. And the truth is, Rav Kook was in everybody's camp. And that's, like we said before, the holistic and harmonic ideology of Rav Kook. On the other hand, it's pretty clear today that if you look at all of his students, yes, you will see that Rav Druckmann stresses certain aspects a little differently than Rav Tzvi Tau. But when it comes to the basic issues, all of the students of Rav Tzvi Yehuda, and really anybody who learns the writings of Rav Kook, are pretty in agreement on really any and every issue.
And as you look at Israeli society today, and certainly since last October 7th, Simchat Torah, obviously Rav Kook's writings are imbued with tremendous optimism and hope. Are you personally optimistic as you look at the situation today in the state of Israel? Are you pessimistic, somewhere in between?
I am very optimistic. And Rav Kook writes that any person who believes in God has to be optimistic. And again, that's why he calls his books Orot, the light of. We see the lighter side. Yeah, there are pessimists who get hung up on the darker side of things. But again, here's the arrow. Whenever things are down, it's just a yirida litzorech aliyah. It's like when you want to jump, first you have to bend your knees, you go down, and the further down you push a spring, the higher it's going to jump. I'm very optimistic, simply because the writings of Rav Kook and the religious Zionist camp is building bridges that were never really found before, or were not as strong as they are today. The secular, non-religious are becoming more and more and more traditional. I personally have met countless people who have become more religious and more connected with the land of Israel and with Judaism Bichlal since last Simchat Torah. Not just people who made a note that if God brings them out alive, out of the security room, they'll do tshuva or they will convert, but on the battlefield as well. And I have heard of, I haven't met personally, I've heard that within the Haredi community, there are people waking up. When you hear Rabbi Shvat say that, yes, this is a milchemet mitzvah, and, that has practical ramifications. The Haredim were involved at the beginning of the war in Zaka and in the Chevra Kadisha. But usually they are the last ones to realize what's happening. and to go with Jewish history and with the God of history. But the vast majority of Jewish people also in Chutz La'aretz. I work with students abroad who are there being driven to the land of Israel also because of anti-Semitism there. Also, in general, here we have the home court advantage. And just like in sports, if you're in the land of Israel, you have the home court advantage where we run the army, we run the state, we run and even when we have problems, we are the ones to blame. And we can change it in the ballot boxes, in the maternity wards. Rav Kook writes again that whenever you want to make a change and improvement in the world, the answer is not in the politics, but it is in educating the next generation differently. Because that's where changes are made. That's where the most idealistic people are. So there is a lot going on. I saw that you did a program on what has changed after October 7th. I didn't get a chance to hear it, but there is so much going on, and it is almost all for the good. And even things that are unfortunately not so good, for example, boys who are falling, the kidnapped, as a process and as the messianic era is advancing, we see that things are getting, as you know, the kids today, one of the big popular songs is Od Yoter Tov, Od Yoter Tov. Things are getting, and they will get even better and better and better. And anybody who believes in God, that he runs the show, and anyone who has seen what's been going on over the last 120 years of the Zionist movement and the awakening to Torah and the yeshiva world and religious Zionism and making Torah relevant and modern and applicable and appealing. And as an educator, I can only be optimistic. That doesn't mean that there aren't challenges. Yeah, there are challenges, but all the arrows really are leading in the same direction. That we are in historic times, and Rav Kook was a game changer to help prepare us for these game-changing periods.
On a personal note, what's on your plate now? What's the next project, whether it's Rav Kook or another project? What Rabbi Shvat are you working on right now, and where can people access your writings and works?
So as I mentioned before, you can find a couple hundred of shiurim and a couple thousand of articles in English on Rav Kook's Hashkafa on the YU Torah and the Yeshivat Beit El websites. I have a blog, which I put out something usually on Friday afternoons about Parshat HaShavua. It really started with October 7th, and especially former students of mine who are living in America, and they are not hearing the religious Zionist Torah of Rav Kook, and they want to know, okay, so what should we be doing? How should we be understanding things? How can we apply that to Parshat HaShavua? So I have that weekly blog. You can contact me through email, arishvat@gmail.com, and sign up. I'm working now on bringing Rav Kook's ideas in English to the Anglo population. The concept of Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Torat Yisrael, the nation of Israel, living in the land of Israel according to the Torah of Israel. I think that a lot of Jews, and I get questions from Jews in Lakewood and Borough Park, usually anonymously, who are curious about the writings of Rav Kook, about, hey, maybe there is something going on. Maybe we're not just in another galut. And so I'm writing a book on, I don't know what the name is going to be, but Bezrat Hashem, you'll find it. Hopefully it'll come out within the next year. Just look for Ari Shvat. The name SHVAT and is the Hebraicized version of CHWAT. So some people may know me by that name.
Rabbi Shvat, thank you so much for today, and urge all our viewers and listeners to go online and listen to and read Rabbi Shvat's works on Rav Kook, and you should continue to go from strength to strength, from chayil to chayil. Thank you so much.
Amen. And you too on your important podcast. A very, very nice idea. Rav Kook, who talks a lot about the God of history, he would love your idea.
Thank you so much. Thank you.